What I thought we'd do is go through the components of the spar. We'll be showing the assembly of the main spar, main wing spar. If you have purchased a kit, this is all assembled for you, but if you're building from scratch, this should be helpful just to go through. We're going to identify the components at this point, how everything goes together. Then we'll assemble this, we'll get it all clecoed together and come back and show you before we rivet everything. And then of course this whole assembly gets solid riveted. What I've got laid out here is just quickly, you'll see the carry through on the back side. I've got clecoed, I'm sorry, this is the front side, this is the forward side of the spar. The spar caps angle face back to the aft. So I've got the carry through clecoed in place on top of the spar web, which is clecoed in place. And then we've got the top spar cap center section left and right, and then the bottom center section spar cap is clecoed in place. Now, as you're making these components, I can't stress enough about polishing the fittings. We'll move over this way, we'll show how things go together. It's the same thing on the right with one exception. The left side of the wing has an extra rib for the step rib. So it goes rib, stiffener, this goes on the front of the spar, rib, stiffener, and then rib. On the left side, because it's got the wing walk, it'll go rib, rib, rib. This stiffener will be replaced by a rib. But that's the only main differences. I've got bolts laid out here. If we were going to assemble this, you know, we'd go ahead and bolt together. These AN 5-7s go through to bolt the carry through to the top spar cap. Come across the top here, we've got on the outboard panel, there's a support brace that goes in here. This is a spacer that fills the gap, if you will, between the spars, and then this bolts on the top, bolts through with the wing attach fitting. This all goes together. I'll leave that out for now just so you can see it, but the wing attach fitting would go on the back side. We've got basically three 3-7s, AN5, and then there's 1-10 because of the extra thickness of this, of this support that's going to go in the middle. So there's three. I'm actually putting the bolts in backwards just so you can see it. The rule of thumb is you bolt everything top to bottom, aft, or forward to aft. So this being the aft side of the spar, the bolts actually come through the other side. But that's preliminarily how everything will go together on the spar. The bottom is pretty straightforward. It's the same fitting on the bottom side, same bolt count, 3-7s and 1-10 through the extra stiffener. And I always like to get those bolted together, kind of finger tight with nuts and things before I rivet, just so everything's lining up good. It'll help you with your alignment, making sure there's no wrinkles in the spar web anywhere. Once those are together, there's the fittings here, we call it the stick mount angles. There's two of these. They go forward. They go on the back side as well as the front side. They get bolted through with -10 bolts. Show you quickly. I guess we should have pre-assembled some of this before we started. We may have to clean the holes out a little bit, but you can see that that's how that stick mount goes through. And these are crucial. If you think it's in the way or something like that, that's a lot of strength. It's very important to the stress of this center section carry through. I've had guys extend these out a little longer. If they want to, that's fine. But we know that this will carry the 4Gs that it's designed for. So this is where the stick will mount later on. Like I said, same thing on the left side, except over here we've got rib, 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 and then there's a stiffener, then rib, stiffener, and rib. Other than that, it's symmetrical with the exception of of the one step rib. We'll get this kind of put together a little more fashion, and we'll show you before we. Okay, here we've got the center spar assembly pre-assembled. We've just put everything together to make sure that you know, the bolts line up. There's no interference with overlaying of materials. We've got all the bolts in place, just nothing's tightened down yet. You can see we got the center carry-through supports bolted in place, a couple clecos in place. On this side, of course, you're looking at the aft side of the spar now. Everything's clecoed. We've got the supports in place, the angles, spacers in place. On the back side here, I'll show you, we've got the rib stiffeners clecoed in place. Keep in mind that on this outboard stiffener on each side, the top, you'll see a 1/4 inch hole on the plans. That's the top attach bolt for your landing gear, whether it's a tri-gear or tail dragger. There'll be a bolt through there with a torque plate from the landing gear bolted to the bottom of the spar. Fittings are in place. Nothing's tightened down yet. You can see we've got a full-size hole, the 3/8 hole through the spar fittings on this airplane. If you receive fittings from us or in your kit, of course in your kit the spar is all pre-assembled, everything's been together, so the dihedral's set. But normally we'll show on the plans a 1/4 inch hole out here where the wing attach bolt is. That's just for alignment only. Once you decide that you've got the dihedral exactly where you want it, you'll pull that alignment pin out, and we'll show that in a later process. Then we drill the 3/8 hole through. This is going to be bolted with the AN6 bolts. There's also an option for tapered pins. The tapered pins are nice if it's going to be removed frequently for transport or something, but if you're pretty much going to assemble it, hanger it, fly it, the bolts are fine for that. So at this point we're going to solid, everything on here gets solid rivets. There are no pull rivets in this assembly at all, and we'll go ahead and get the rivet squeezer out, start riveting this together, and we'll come back and show you. Now obviously the last point that it's not here is all the rib locations, but the ribs actually get fastened on once the spar is installed in the fuselage. So this is just the pre-assembly of the spar, and then the spar will get bolted into the fuselage, and ribs installed after that, skins following that, of course. So at this point we're going to rivet this spar assembly, and then the next step we'll show is cutting the fuselage and getting. The next step we want to cover is marking the fuselage, getting in preparation to put the spars through, the main wing spar and then the trailing edge spar. And we'll start with the trailing edge spar back here, and hopefully you saw the note on the plans if you're scratch building or from a kit that you have not installed these lower rivets here in the corner supports for the bulkhead. What we want to do is we're trying to mark a spot on the fuselage for the rear spar, which is 3/4 angle to come through there. So if you just take a short piece of angle, tuck it up behind there and slide it out to the skin and mark around the angle, slide it to the other side, mark around the angle. Then you'll have marks there. You want to drill the corners so you can cut this from the outside, because obviously cutting it from the inside. We use a little angle drill just to pop a hole through the 3 corners, and then you can see on the outside there that we've actually cut those holes out. So the rear spar, of course, will come through here. And so that's what it takes to cut out for the rear spar. Then on the front spar, in your plans, you'll see, I believe it's page 41, has a pattern to lay in the fuselage to cut this fuselage skin to allow the spar to come through. There's a line on there that says this line is 7 3/4 from bulkhead B. So this leading edge of the spar cut out right here is 7 3/4. If you place that in there, get it all as straight as you can. keep in mind this is a clearance cut, so if it's a little tight later on, you can trim it out to make sure it's clear, because the most important thing is that when the spar is installed, it's straight and plumb and aligned. So this is just a clearance hole, basically. So tape it down in there. We ran a red felt Sharpie around the line. We'll take that paper out, and then we'll cut that skin in preparation for the spar. Then we'll show you how the spar gets installed. Okay, we left off with marking out the fuselage skin here for the center section, main spar and rear spar. As you can see, we've got those, we've got them cut out, cut the skins. We've slid the spar in place. The rear spar has been cut out, the holes, and put in place. Rear spar is clecoed and ready to go. One thing I'll point out, as you probably have noticed if you've been cutting and trying to fit this spar in, there's some little things like this hole right here that you got a notch for the bolts to slide through. That pattern it's just a clearance pattern, so that should get you started. You may have to trim it up or down, or depending on how square your fuselage was built, you may have to clear a little bit of metal away, but you want to get it in place so it's sitting on the bottom rails in place. We've got a couple C-clamps in there just to kind of hold it in place. What we've done so far is we've been able to center the spar. You can do that by several references. There's a rivet right in the center. You can draw a center line down your fuselage. There's a center rivet on the carry-through. You can line that up. You can measure from the top spar cap from the fuselage out to the tip on each side, get it centered that way. That's the first measurement you want to do, is get it centered in place. Then when you cleco a rib on to the main spar and clamp it to the rear spar, that'll set the angle of the main spar. Okay, that'll set the main spar vertical. So that should be pretty much in place. What's left to do, if there is something that you want to check, would be to measure from the some point back on the fuselage to the tip. And what we'll do is just take a tape measure, and you can take, just so it's the same on both sides, I'm going to hook it on to the back of bulkhead F there and pull it forward. We'll pull it forward here to find a fixed point. In this case, I'm going to use the rear point of the cutout for the spar, 126 3/4, and then we'll measure that on the other side and make sure it's the same. If it's not, you know, you can loosen these clamps in here a little bit and get it square fore and aft. So another thing that helps, another way to check visually, it's important to have the main spar parallel to the horizontal surface in the back. So if you remember, we leveled the horizontal spar with the fuselage. We always leave a level, almost always leave a level on the side rail, so in case we bump it, we can always check it. But we got the side rails level, the horizontal still level. This gives us a reference here to check that the spar is going to be level. So we'll take measurements, you know, from here down and out there at the tip. We can make sure that that's all level. And again, it's not going to affect how the airplane flies, but if you have any home builders at your field walk by your airplane, everybody walks 15 feet out in front of the airplane and eyeballs across the center section of the wing to the horizontal to see if you're a good builder or not. So it's important to try to get that perfect. The way you'd adjust that, of course, is just shimming, putting washers underneath the bottom spar cap to the bottom rails before you bolt things down. And things might move a little bit. When you start bolting things down, it's just sitting in here loose, it may move a little bit. So bolt it down, check it again. If you got to shim it a little more, go ahead and do that. But that'll get everything in there nice and straight. So that's the point of getting everything lined up. We'll take a break here. The next video will show how the main spar is actually attached to the fuselage. Okay, when we left off last time, we were at a point where we had the main spar through the fuselage. We're ready to get it anchored into position. As you recall, we had the upper and lower carry-through brackets clamped in place, but nothing riveted. So we've gone back, and this may look a little complex, but it's pretty simple what we've done. We've got a level on here. It's nice just to leave a level across the side rails and always leave it in the same point. We've leveled it there. We know that that is parallel with the horizontal stab, so that's going to be our main fuselage level, really throughout the rest of the build probably, even up to this point. We've got another level sitting on here on the fuselage just for pitch levelness. That seems to, once it's sitting in the cradles, it really can't move much, but as you're working around this, you'll be bumping this, and always go back and check your level before you're making final clamps and clecos and things. So we have the fuselage set up. This piece of angle across the fuselage side rails is just a fixture so that we can clamp things to hold it in place. If you remember, we had the two bottom bolts through the bottom of the spar cap, through the spar, into the bottom rails. Those are just kind of finger tight at this point. There's nothing tightened up. They're just finger tight, is the best way to think about it. So this spar is still loose in here. We can get it tweaked into place. So with those in place, we did the measurements from the tips to the tail to make sure we had, if you will, the yaw measurement in place so that the spar is perpendicular to the center line of the fuselage. We've got it centered left and right. We talked about that before. Now what we're trying to do is get the spar plumb, because if you just tighten those bolts down the bottom, because of the angle in the bottom rails, it's going to suck that spar aft, and that makes positive incidence, and we don't want that. So they're still just finger tight in the bottom. We have put the rear spar through, of course. We've got two ribs on each side that are cleco to the spar and then clamped at the trailing edge, because those don't get drilled until the skin goes on. But that's going to help us orient the spar. Now realize that we're not so concerned about the tip of the spar right now as the root of the spar being plumb. Because even as rigid as this spar is, in twist with nothing to support it, those will move a little bit. But just to make sure that we can check everything, we've got this top bracket on here to help. That also gives the roll in the spar. That'll control that the spar is horizontal. Again, with our level, with the horizontal, everything is going to be clamped off of this for the main spar. And then we're basically doing the same thing with this other angle in the back. Just the trailing edge spar is just 3/4 by 1/8 angle. Naturally, it's not real rigid until you get things riveted to it. So it may have a little droop, it may have a little bow, whatever. But just with a bracket across the back and a couple down supports, if you will, clamped to it, that brings everything up in alignment. So we've got everything now clamped. We've checked it. We've triple checked it. We know that the spar is where we want to put it in. So if we take a look at these carry-through brackets in place, they're basically cleco through the skin. If we take a little closer look at them, they're cleco through the skin, and they're clamped to the spar cap in the stick mount angle, as we call it. So the spar is still floating in there, but we've gone ahead and cleco these through the skin. So the next thing we're going to do is drill. I like to drill an 1/8" pilot hole through here, then open it up to 1/4 inch. Those will be 1/4 inch bolts. One thing to warn you about is to make sure that when you drill this hole through the top support and spar cap, that you don't interfere with the carry-through mounting bolts below. You can shift that a little bit one way or the other if you need to. Keep it aft. As long as you've got a 1/4 inch of edge distance on the spar cap, it's plenty of support there. So just verify that when you drill through here, you don't drill right on top of one of the bolts, and I wished you hadn't, because that makes it real difficult then to get the bolt installed. So now we're going to drill down through here. We're going to bolt this at the center section. We're going to take this all back apart, because now the center section spar will be anchored in place, and we'll go to finishing the fuselage, everything that's up here, so the wing's not in our way, and then when we come back, we'll be finishing some of the top sections of the fuselage. To fasten the spar with these carry-through supports and spar support brackets, we've got all the levels in place. We're keeping the fuselage level left and right are in the roll axis. We got the pitch axis controlled here with this level. We know everything's in good shape. We've checked the spar to make sure that it's plumb or vertical, which should be just checked here. The best place to check it is probably right here at the carry through, because that's real rigid. Just put a level on there and make sure that that's centered. That should be vertical as 90 degrees to the side rail. If you want to, for now, you can check it out here at the tip, just to kind of get an idea where you're at. That's what that back bracket is for, to keep that sag out of the rear spar with no skins on it. Everything's kind of flexible. We've checked that, everything's in place. We've checked all the measurements to make sure we're square with the fuselage, centered on the fuselage. I'm going to go ahead and attach. Okay, we're at a point, as we mentioned before, we're assembling the center section spar to the fuselage. We've got everything in place. The first, we had everything lined up, as I said. We measured everything, had it where we thought we wanted it. We had everything clamped in place, basically with C-clamps. The first thing I always do is drill these 2 bolts down through the bottom of the spar into the longeron angles down here on the bottom of the fuse. I drill those, I draw them up tight. We've confirmed that all the alignment is square. Now when I draw that up, that might shift the horizontal plane of the spar, so we still got our angle on here. I measure at a point, I always go clear out because it'll be the most accurate. Measure down. On this airplane we have 6 1/4 inches at both places, so I'm comfortable that being bolted down tight is all in place. We've torqued the bottom bolts there. Now the carry-through supports, as we call it, to the fuselage, we've got them clamped in place. Basically they're pre-drilled to go through the fuselage and clamp back here. Now what I like to do is we'll drill and cleco these out to the fuselage skins, and then the last thing we'll do is just replace this clamp with a bolt down through on all 4 sides. That ensures that everything is tight to the fuselage skins and it's clamped to the spar, so it shouldn't be anything in a bind or tweaked when you finally finish that up. Now these are stainless steel rivets. It calls for on your plans and in your kit, stainless rivets. Just remember, these are stainless through here to the fuselage. AN 4-6 bolts, 4 of them, 6 of them counting the ones through the bottom for the hardware. And that'll take care of mounting the spar. Of course, we talked about the rear spar. It's clecoed in place. We're going to leave the main spar in it at this point. We're going to remove the ribs and the rear spar so that we can continue to work on this fuselage area, the engine compartment, tank, stick assembly, all that. It just makes for less stuff in your way when you're trying to do the final completion of the fuselage. You can go ahead and build the center section at this point, but as you can imagine, then you're working over the wing to do everything. Well, one thing I need to point out is marked on the plans and in your kit, these rivets that will go through about the last 6 or 7 rivets of this top spar support are going to be in the wing root fairing piece of sheet metal. So it's noted on your plans to leave those out until final assembly and of the wing root. If you put them in, you'll just be drilling them back out when you do the fairings on the leading edge. So leave them clecoed for now. You can put a couple rivets in the front if you want. I like to just leave them all clecoed until I do the skins. Okay, in this step we're going to continue with the spar attached to the fuselage. We've got the 4 spar attached strips here, the 4 little spar attached strips. I'll show you where those go. And then the spar cutout covers. There's 2 of these, and basically they go on the inside of the fuselage here. We've got this big gap that we had to leave open to be able to get the spar stuff through. So it'll come just bent. You have to do all this trimming here to make it work. Just goes against the skin and up against the spar, and then we'll cleco and rivet that in place. There's 2 of those, one for the left side, one for the right side. And then these spar attached strips go on the outside. They're 4, they're all the same. They go from that stick mount angle, which is sticking through the fuselage, on the top side of it, and then there'll be another one that goes on the bottom side below that stick mount angle, and there'll be two of those, of course, on each side. So we'll get those clecoed in place and ready to rivet, and that should take care of the spar attach. And you can also see we've gone ahead and riveted the support angles, the upper and lower support angles. Reiterate this several times. Leave these rivets out. It may not make sense to you now, but once this wing root fairing comes on here, these are going to be in your way. You'll end up drilling them back out. But these are stainless steel rivets that attach these spar attach angles, and leave the top 4 or 5, 6 rivets out of the top one on the aft side for later reasons. Okay, we're talking about the spar cutout cover and the center spar attach strips. As you can see down here, we've got those clecoed in place and ready to be riveted. The spar attach strips are on the outside of the spar, and then you can see on the inside here we've got the spar cutout cover clecoed in place. We'll get all these riveted as well. Once we have that in, we'll be ready to start on the. We need to get the stick assembly installed so we can do the spar cover, which trails back into the seat. At this point, though, we're going to go ahead and put these seat adjustment angles back on here. This allows you to adjust the back of the seat so that you can recline, sit more straight up. We've got this one clecoed in place. Basically, your kit will come to you with this angle pre-drilled for the support rod holes. Your plans will call out 3.8 inches from bulkhead C to this, so we'll clamp that in place as we've done over here, and then drill down on 1-inch center the holes, and then of course they need to be countersunk. If you haven't used your micro stop for anything yet, this is a micro stop tool that will allow you to countersink those holes for flush rivets so that the canopy and gasket sets real nice and tight. Flush there. Earlier we talked about this support bracket, and that's what this will basically do is, as you can see, I'll compress this. I won't do that because it's just held in by clecos, but that makes the seat back adjustment much more comfortable for the pilot. A lot of people like to sit straight up. Some people like to recline a little more. And as you'll see in the later video, the bottom of the seat back will be adjustable as well. So we're going to go ahead and rivet the spar attach strips and the spar cutout covers, and we'll get these clecoed and ready to rivet together as well.